everyone. This is Read the World. I'm Emma, and I have been trying to read 3 books for each of the cultural awareness heritage months, whatever that category of months is. And this year, to start off this tradition of mine, I have been reading 3 biographies that are relevant to each of those months. So I read 3 biographies in February for Black History Month, and then this past month I read 3 biographies for Women's History Month. And so I'll be talking about what that was like here in this video. The first one that I read was Cleopatra by Stacy Schiff. I actually listened to this one as an audiobook and I loved it. I thought it was so much fun. I thought there were so many great historical details. I'm also just really into history and it was really fun to like remember kind of the foundations of ancient world history that I learned as a kid. Ancient Egypt, the Roman Empire, Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, pharaohs and wars and politics and all these things. I loved all of the historical context that was given. I thought that it gave a really appropriate amount of historical context to understand what was going on and why it was significant. And then I also thought that there was a really satisfying amount of personal details about Cleopatra, what she was like as a person, especially since we don't actually have that many records about her. And I was really surprised by what kind of a person she was, that she was clearly so deeply intelligent and that she was able to bring Egypt into a time of great prosperity and keep them there and really take care of her people. I thought it was so enlightening to learn about how strategic she was, how socially adept she was at navigating lots of different situations with different leaders from the Roman Empire. I also hadn't realized, I knew that she was romantically involved with Mark Antony because of the Shakespeare play, but I didn't know that she also was involved with Julius Caesar. She had children with both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. And that was just so fascinating. I thought it was so impressive that she was able to maintain fairly positive ties with the Roman Empire during a time of a lot of tumult and change in that part of the world. I was a little disappointed that there weren't more details about what life in ancient Egypt was like. There were a lot of details about what ancient Rome was like and all the politics and the battles and the wars and the scandals and the murders and everything like that, which I understand because Cleopatra was in Rome and negotiating and dalliancing and involved in a lot of that. And so I understand that that was very relevant to her, what was going on in her life and the way that it impacted Egypt at that time as well. And I was really interested in all of the details about daily life in ancient Rome, but I wanted even more detail about daily life in ancient Egypt. There was some detail. I loved hearing about their religious practices, their practices of medicine and education. I loved learning about the Library of Alexandria, but every once in a while you get a little tidbit that I wanted to learn even more about, but it didn't go into detail and I really wish that it had. So now I guess I have to read an entire book all about ancient Egypt and what life was like then. Maybe I just need to read a ton of biographies of different pharaohs throughout history. I also hadn't realized that ancient Egypt was quite egalitarian when it came to men and women in power. It was still important that Cleopatra had like either a husband or a son or some kind of like male counterpart in order to seem like an appropriate ruler, is basically what it's talking about. I think that was my understanding of what was going on, but it was still perfectly acceptable for Cleopatra to have so much power and control in ancient Egypt. And that was in huge contrast to ancient Rome, where women were really just kept in the private sphere and did not participate in public life. Cleopatra, being so outspoken and such a strong woman, was actually seen as very negative and the exact opposite of what a woman was supposed to be in ancient Rome. And it was really interesting to see these 2 powerful empires. Well, I guess was Egypt an empire at that point? It was like a vassal state of the Roman Empire. These 2 powerful states and they're very different cultures. And I thought that the author did a really great job of explaining the cultural differences between ancient Rome and ancient Egypt and how that would have impacted the interactions and events that were occurring and how it would have impacted Cleopatra's life. I don't think I've ever really read nonfiction that explained ancient cultural differences so well. I thought that was really fascinating. Then I read with my eyes, and this is really impressive, okay? I read Frida, a biography of Frida Kahlo by Hayden Herrera, and this is impressive because it was like 450 pages long or something. I was carrying around a book like this thick, all about the life of Frida Kahlo, and I am obsessed with her. I could go on and on and on. This was a very exhaustive biography because she was alive more recently, so we have a lot of records of what her life was like. And I think the author also was able to do interviews with some people who are still alive who knew her or were adjacent to her. And it was just so exciting to see what a dynamic, incredible person she was. She was an artistic genius. She was an intellectual genius. She was a communist, a feminist. She was disabled, chronically ill, and in pain her entire life. She was openly bisexual. She was passionate about Mexico and her indigenous heritage, but she also was very outspoken about her Hungarian Jewish heritage. She was a style icon who loved to just put on layers and layers of jewelry and clothing and makeup and all these things. She was known for her lipstick. She was known for loving animals. She had monkeys and parrots and dogs all throughout her house. She loved children. She desperately wanted to have children, but was never able to because of the injuries that she sustained when she was 19 that impacted her for the rest of her life. She was an incredible teacher. She was beloved by the students that she taught in an art school. She was a political and social activist. She was so many things. And she died in her 40s when she was like 48. She died so young, and she contributed so much. She also, what I loved learning about was that a lot of people like to refer to her style as surrealism. It has all of these very strange, eerie, dreamlike qualities. But surrealism was a school of art developed in Europe based off of very specific discussions around dreams and psychology and literally like painting another world. But she wasn't painting anything out of a dream or anything from another reality. She was painting her reality, not a surreality. She was painting her actual reality, the things that she was experiencing and feeling. She was just visualizing in these paintings, and I loved that understanding of her work. This book, I highly recommend. I gave Cleopatra 4 stars because, I just wanted those more details. I gave Frida 5 stars because I just thought it was so exhaustive. I learned so much. I thought that the writing style was still quite fresh, kept me interested, not too dry. I thought was an appropriate level of personality for the subject matter. If you're willing to invest the time to read 450 pages about the life of Frida Kahlo, I think it's worth it. I felt inspired by her. I felt excited by her life. And I liked how it talks about so much about her life and what it was like, the people around her. There's a little bit of historical context about what was going on in Mexico at the time and like when World War II started and that impact on the world. And then I loved the analysis of her art. I love it when art is explained to me. It makes me feel so much smarter because there's just so much going on with art and I don't always know what's going on. And I'm like, oh, I can tell there's something that it's trying to say and I don't know what it is, but I'm sure it would be so cool. And so just going into all of the experiences that she's portraying in this art, what she's doing, the meaning behind it that you can derive from the things that were going on in her life when she painted it. I gained so much insight from learning about her art with the way the author of this book explained all of it. I just thought it was gorgeous. And then the way that it talked about her impact as a person, the way that she impacted the people around her, her community, how she impacted art. I just thought it was fantastic. I'm going to be thinking about Frida forever. I still wouldn't necessarily display a lot of her art in the home. I would still say a lot of her art deeply disturbs me and grosses me out. But I will definitely still look at it. I want to go see a lot of it in person. It grosses me out, but like it's gross for a purpose. And I love that. I will definitely still look at it and appreciate it. I'm not gonna like hang it above my bed. I'm still gonna consume it and just appreciate it. Oh my gosh. Also, she was so weird. She was so eccentric. Oh, she was so freaking cool, man. She was so weird. She had like her own made up slang that she would use all the time, like her own language. She would like, I don't know, she would like make and hang skeletons of Judas around her room. She would play jokes on people. She was a big prankster. She was so interesting. Oh my gosh. I loved learning about Frida Kahlo. It made me so excited to be a woman and to learn about women's history. And then finally, the third book that I tried to read for Women's History Month was Eleanor of Aquitane, A Life by Alison Weir. I really wanted to learn about Eleanor of Aquitane because back in 2020, I binged the young adult fantasy trilogy, His Dark Assassin. The first book is called Grave Mercy, and it's by Robin Lefevers, I want to say. And I loved reading that series. I thought it was just so fun. I still think about it sometimes. It's historical fantasy that takes place in the Middle Ages of France, and Eleanor of Aquitaine is a character in that book. So even though it's all fantasy, there are like historical elements in it. And I thought that was so fun. I can't remember why I was so excited that Eleanor of Aquitaine was a real person and why I wanted to learn more about her 5 years ago, but I put a book about her on my to read list way back then and was so excited to have the opportunity to read it for this project to make a video about, and then was sorely disappointed because this book was so boring that it made me forget why I was so excited about Eleanor of Aquitaine in the first place. I think she was a teenager in Grave Mercy, but I can't remember if she was married or not, and I can't remember why she was so cool to me. I can kind of see why she's cool from this book. She maintained control over her lands that were part of her inheritance and manipulated multiple kings to gain stuff, I guess. I don't even know. She was married to the King of France, and then they got divorced, and then she was married to the King of England. And the beginning of the book was more interesting because she did a lot of like scheming and plotting to like get the King of France to divorce her so that she could marry the King of England in like this much more advantageous arrangement. And that was really interesting. But then in the middle, it was just talking so much about all of King Henry II, so that's the King of England, like military campaigns and all the different places that he went. And it was so dry. It was like a textbook. It was so excruciatingly boring. And I was a little bit frustrated with Cleopatra, not including so much about what Cleopatra's life would have been like, and that it focused so much about the men in her life, but I understood their relevance and like could have used a bit more Cleopatra, but like I got what the book was doing. With this one, again, I understand that they didn't really include women in records a lot. We just don't have a lot of information about Queen Eleanor. But then why? But I was never really clear on why it was necessary to just have so much information on all of her husband's military expeditions and exactly a list of exactly which people were on this hunting expedition with her son, exactly which lands her other son inherited when he became Duke of whatever, what the names of all the different noblemen and what land they had. Like, I just don't care. Oh my gosh, it was just so many like lists of people and places, and so many people and places, and just like nothing actually interesting happening. Well, just like just pages upon pages where it's like, and we don't know very much about what Eleanor was doing at this time. Okay, but the book is called Eleanor of Aquitaine: A Life, so just help me picture more about what her life would have been like. If you can't tell me exactly what she was doing during this time, why, like, instead of just going on and on about all the things that King Henry was doing, because I do not care about King Henry, I do not care about him, then tell me like what the life of a noblewoman at that time in that place would have been like. What do we know about what they would have done from day to day, what was within her power and influence? Literally tell me anything. Tell me any of the mundane details that don't have to do with crusades and battles for territory and all. I just don't care. Oh my gosh, tell me about how a household was run. Who influenced clothing of the time? Do we know who her friends are? I'm sure if she did, they would have mentioned that. They just loved listing people in this book. Kept telling myself, okay, I'm gonna get this many pages done today, and then like not getting that many pages done. Like, no, I want to make this video. I have to get these pages done. I can make this video about it, and like not getting that done. And I was like, I really want to get this video out. I still have 100 pages left in this huge book, and I'm just not having a good time with it. I don't want to read 100 more pages of this. I got like 250 pages in, okay? I read a lot of it, and I'm not counting it towards like my end of the year total or anything on Goodreads or anything like that. I'm just letting you know that it was attempted. There are other books about Eleanor of Aquitaine. I believe I picked the wrong one. Anyway, I learned so much about women's history this past month. It was interesting to see what these women had in common, how much their sex lives were described in great detail, even when supposedly there wasn't that much information about them in general. I understand part of it that, like, you know, especially in the ancient world, that if you were in a position of power, like who you had children with was going to influence what your children inherited and what you would have power over. I get that. And then also just the world is obsessed with what women are doing in the bedroom all the time. Just can't leave it alone. It was interesting to see that all of them at these different times in different places ran across the limits that their different cultures put on women, being eclipsed by the men in their lives. Cleopatra still needing to have some kind of male consort or other in order to be seen as valid, not being seen as legitimate in the Roman Empire because she was a woman. Eleanor of Aquitaine having to fight for her ancestral lands to be under control as all these different men are like bartering women around like chattel for their own gain. And then Frida being eclipsed by her husband Diego Rivera at the beginning of her career. But then, you know, eventually she definitely defined herself. And now that was another thing they had in common, that despite all of the challenges that they came across and all the limitations put on women in their different times, they are now all remembered for who they are as individuals and their accomplishments. It was a somewhat spiritual experience to feel connected to these women from 3 different millennia and 3 different continents. That was pretty cool. Let me know what you read for Women's History Month this year, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.